Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Hey, it's Friday. We've made it through another week. And so as I've been doing the last few weeks on Fridays, I pull out the list. I keep a list on my desk of things people comment on, complain about, or things I see popping up over and over again in the videos. And this is kind of like just a wrap-up, clean-up type show. Some of these I find them entertaining. So I hope you do too. But for instance, I did a video a long time ago. And by a long time ago, I mean probably about a year ago, about how I was dealing with an attorney who was being really, really difficult. And then one day he just dropped dead. And the title of the video is When God Smites Your Opponents. And I pointed out all of the stuff the guy had done prior to his keeling over. And I mentioned that he was the protagonist in the story. And I had several people, including somebody this past week, go, Steve, he wasn't the protagonist. Look it up. Well, it's funny. If you look up the word protagonist in the dictionary, it says one of the major characters in the story. Now, I understand what they're getting at, but the point is, I used the word correctly. I mentioned before that due to recent events in the news, many people have been told to stay where they are. And I have purposely used euphemisms, tap dancing around this topic for a variety of reasons, which I've covered before and I won't get into now. But I've actually referred to it as both a lockdown or a stay at home, and I've avoided using the word quarantine simply because to me that sounds very, very severe. And also it's not technically a quarantine for most people because most people can go out. So I did have one person send me an email just going nuts about how it's not a lockdown either. And the weird part about it is that, first of all, it varies wildly from state to state. We've got 50 states in America. And so what's happening in one state can be very different from what's happening in another state. There are some states that so far haven't done anything because they don't think they've got a problem yet. Other states not only have got problems, but there are cities with problems. So there might be different rules in one particular city. I know cities that have curfews, not all. So to suggest that I shouldn't call it, being the bigger scope thing, a lockdown because it ain't a lockdown where you are, well, I'm sorry, but you know what I'm talking about. And much of what I often find people quibbling about is they know what I'm talking about. And I didn't misuse the word, but they are, for whatever reason, a contrarian and they want to argue with me. I also got a very, very lengthy email from somebody who was upset that I'd used the word stimulus to describe both the checks that they're talking about sending out now and previous programs. And I seem to recall that there was a program under one of the Bushes, the president, not the thing out in the yard, and also maybe one under Obama, where the government sent people money. And I mentioned that those, although were checks from the government, they were different because I believe at least one of them was simply an advance against the next year's taxes, meaning that they gave you the money now, but they took it away from you in the next year's tax filing. And so I had referred to what's happening now as a stimulus, and I said it's similar to the stimulus they did a while back. And I got an email saying that, no, what they did before wasn't a stimulus, it was a rebate. And what's weird about this is what they call it is actually irrelevant. I said it's a check from the government. They can call it a zebra. They can call it a gonculator. It doesn't matter what they call it. It's a check from the government. We all know what I'm talking about, right? But I was curious about this. So I looked it up to see what they called it back then. And they called it a stimulus rebate. A stimulus rebate. So the fact that I called it a stimulus and what's happening now a stimulus, and to say I was wrong because no, previous one was a rebate. Well, no, it was a stimulus rebate. And really, again, does it matter what we call it? Oh, boy. In perhaps one of the strangest allegations I've ever had someone make, I don't know why I'm wearing these. I don't need them. My own handwriting is like 75-point type, okay? It's like I write for my audience. It's hard to read, but the letters are very, very tall. Every now and then, someone will tell me that they decided to do some investigation. I became curious to do some research. Do we really have to pay our taxes? Turns out you don't have to. Do you really need a driver's license? No, you don't. I did some research. I figured this out. And I got an email from a guy who told me that he did some research And the census only applies to census workers, meaning that the census legally can count how many people they've hired, but those workers aren't allowed to count other people. That would be illegal. The census, of course, I don't know why it upsets so many people. I've also gotten and I mentioned this I think last week, but I'm still getting people complaining about several aspects of the census. And one thing that people tell me is they go, it's unconstitutional for them to come to my house and ask me questions. It's unconstitutional. Most of the people who tell me things are unconstitutional haven't read the Constitution, because the Constitution specifically says that the government can conduct a census, and in fact, it's in the Constitution. So the idea they're coming to your house and asking you questions pursuant to a census that's described in the Constitution, by its very nature, cannot be unconstitutional. Can it? Which also reminds me, I got in a debate yesterday with somebody in the thread underneath the video who told me that crimes where there are no victims are unconstitutional. He goes, it's in the Constitution. I go, where? It's in the Constitution. I go, so you're telling me that somewhere in the Constitution it says only crimes that have victims can be prosecuted? He goes, yes. I go, where? And he goes, it's in the Constitution. Okay, I've said this before, and again, I don't want to repeat myself. The Constitution itself is a very short and concise document. In fact, I now have a t-shirt that contains the entire wording of the Constitution on its face. I wore it about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. And the fact that the entire document can fit on a t-shirt means that if someone says to you, where is it in the Constitution? As a thought exercise, you should go look it up. Go look it up and find it. And you know, some of the funniest arguments I get from people are the people who say, but Steve, that's unconstitutional. I say, why? They say, well, it's in the Constitution. Where? The second you say where, they realize that they can't just go, oh, it says there. No, where? Where is it? So I did the story about the situation in Texas where a company had floated the idea of asking their workers to stay on the job and then take the stimulus money and use it and consider that their pay. So in other words, the government's paying you for that period of time, we're not, but you're going to still work for us. And the news organization that did that story, I got a very nice note, by the way, from the author who wrote the story, thanking me for using his story. And I thought it's pretty cool that the guy actually saw it. They called an attorney in Texas, who I mentioned his first name was Austin, which I thought was pretty cool. And they called him and they said, you know, what are your thoughts on this? And he said, well, obviously it's illegal. It's a violation of the minimum wage laws. And then he said, as a general thing, he says, you know, Texas is not exactly a pro-labor state. He goes, it's a right-to-work state. And then he goes, and they can also, they can fire you at will. It's an at-will state. I got about 30 or 40 people sending me emails or commenting and saying, Steve, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Because Texas is an at-will state. That means they can fire you at will. So why is he mentioning right to work? Well, Texas is both. Texas is an at-will state, and Texas is a right to work state. And he was making a point about the environment in Texas in the labor field. And the field is such that it is a right to work state and it is an at-will state. And that's what he said. It's both. It's both. And the idea that he mentioned that it's both, and then he said, and the at-wills is obviously the most important part, which is what he said. I had people going, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And I had several people go, I'm surprised he's an attorney and he doesn't understand that. Who says he doesn't he obviously understands it. What he said made complete sense. But people hear what they want to hear, and people also like to think that they heard people make mistakes, even when they didn't hear a mistake. So I mentioned before that I love it when people start a comment with, I'm surprised you don't know. And then they say something I do know. Or they say something that's completely wrong. And I actually have had several people tell me and say, Steve, you understand, and I'm surprised you don't know this, that the stimulus money or the rebate or whatever you're going to call it, you have to pay that back, right? You knew that, right? I'm surprised you don't know that, right? You have to pay that back. You know that, right? No, you don't. at least as of right now, the way the law is written, the money's going to be distributed and it's yours. You can do anything you want with it. And you don't have to pay it back. And I believe some people are confused because there is an angle where you have to pay some of the money back if you weren't entitled to it, because they wanted to base it on 2019 returns, but 2019 returns aren't due till July. And so because of that, many people haven't filed them yet. So they're going to base them on 2018 and assume that your income in 2019 will be the same as 2018. So if your income were to go up in 2019, which is highly unlikely, then you might have been entitled to less than they sent you, and they might ask you to refund the difference. That is the amount you weren't entitled to. The number of people that will happen to will be very, very slim, but it's not everybody. And the idea that you will have to pay your money back and are surprised you don't know that is a false statement. And I also have to point out that whenever I mention money, dollar bills, cash, U.S. currency, I hate to ruin this for you, but that's where the $100 bill was. This is a $100 bill, my friends. I've had it on set now for quite some time, although if you're a real astute viewer, you'd know this is the second hundo. The first hundo, a guy sent me this hundo for, and we traded. I don't know why, but he wanted to have it. And this $100 bill says $100 right across the top. Directly below that, it says the United States of America. And then over on the far left, it says Federal Reserve Note. And on the back, it says the United States of America, $100. And so this is very similar in configuration to $1 bills, $5 bills, $20 bills, etc. Except, of course, the denominations are different and the face here is different and a few other minor touches. For those of you who'd want to say, Steve, I'm surprised you don't know that our bills have different presidents on them. And I had a guy most recently take this to the most absurd length, but I do get comments similar to this anytime I mention money. And people will go, Steve, you know that this right here is not money, right? It's a Federal Reserve note. And I go, well, I suppose it depends on how you define money. If you define money as being something that's not a Federal Reserve note. But I said, but, you know, these are dollars. And most people think of money as dollars. And the guy goes, yeah, but that's not a U.S. dollar. That's a Federal Reserve dollar. And I said, well, no, it actually says the United States of America right there. And it says $100 right there. And he goes, no, but it does not say 100 U.S. dollars. I said, well, it says $100, the United States of America. And he goes, no. For that to be a real dollar, it would have to say 1 U.S. dollar. And the guy said, no. He goes, coins will say 1 U.S. dollar. That's what makes coins money. Currency, like this is not money. This is a Federal Reserve note, but it's not money. He goes, coins are money. And it would say 1 U.S. dollar. I said, really? So I pulled out an Ike dollar. And it says, Liberty, in God we trust, 1977. On the back, of course, it says $1. United States of America. So what's strange about that argument is that the person making it hadn't even bothered to actually look at any coins in his actual pockets or in his actual possession to discover the fact that nowhere does it say on a U.S. dollar, 1 U.S. dollar. It just simply says $1. And in America, the dollar is accepted as money. So when you have a bill that says $100 issued by the United States and an entity called the Federal Reserve, you can argue all you want about whether or not there's a conspiracy involving the Bilderbergers and the Queen of England and something out at Area 51 that you can study, but, and so, these things right here are worthless. Again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you've got any of these worthless pieces of paper, Post Office Box 168, Atlas, Michigan 48411, send them to me. I will study them for you. I won't give you anything for them. Well, we can negotiate. But again, I'm surprised you didn't know that. So there you go. Another Friday. Questions or comments, put them below. Oh, and one last thing. If you've got a photograph of yourself or your dog or your child watching my show, please snap a picture of it, send it to me with a note saying, yes, Steve, you can use this. I'm putting together a video, a compilation of my wonderful audience watching what I do here. And I think it'd make a great video just to compile all these pictures together. So I've already gotten a whole bunch. Send more. Questions, comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. My memory is muddy. What's this river I'm in? New Orleans is sinking, man, and I don't want to swim.